Welcome to On the Books. I'm Lynsey from Kent Libraries, beaming out to you from Folkestone Library today. And this is our very first episode coming to you from the seaside. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate than to speak to our very special guest today, best-selling local author, Anstey Harris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, after all the success you've had, how have things changed since January 19 when your book was published to now?
Obviously, publishing's been hit very hard, like every other industry, because bookshops aren't open. The industry is doing its best to bounce back, again, adapt and survive. There's now an online association of independent book retailers. That's bookshop.org if anybody's looking to buy a book. So it's a nice, reliable, but also kind of ethical and sustainable way to buy a book. And hopefully that will carry on. Also, another aspect of it actually is stimulation. And I know it's the same for everybody. You know, we're living this kind of Groundhog Day life where we never go anywhere, we never do anything, we never see anybody. But thank goodness we have the luxury of that and we're safe. But I think I've never been so aware of how much you need outside stimulation in order to write. So a really good example of this is between the two lockdowns, the Regent's Park Open Air Theatre reopened, and they had an amazing production of Jesus Christ Superstar. It's the scene where Judas is saying to Jesus, like, you made me do this, you wanted me to do this, so, you know, whose fault is this, kind of thing. And I suddenly realised that the thing I was missing in my book 3 was that I hadn't thought of somebody sacrificing something for somebody else. And I was literally sitting there being really moved by this amazing singer giving this incredible performance, and suddenly ping, the light went on, and something that had really been a block in book 3 just smoothed through.
I was going to ask actually, in my mind I had it that this year with all its strange happenings and lockdowns, it might actually be not too bad for writers and authors being locked in and having more time to write. But as you say, it's the lack of stimulus and inspiration maybe is having an effect. But have you had more time to write? Has it helped you in any way?
Yeah. No, I don't have more time to write for a couple of reasons. One is I think this thing that everybody is experiencing, where I read something recently that called it the human bandwidth. As humans, we have a bandwidth that our brain can work up to. And once that's saturated, we just can't process any more information. It all just gets jammed. And I think everybody living with this constant quiet terror, that for all of us increases our level of stress, even though we don't necessarily feel it as a concrete thing. It's there and it's bubbling away in the background. And I think that uses a lot of your bandwidth, of your writing bandwidth. So there just isn't that spare brain that there used to be. And then, yeah, also just this whole stimulation thing, that you're not traveling, you're not seeing things. You know, I've started to read, because I read a lot of friends' work, and I've started to read things that kind of read like a tour around somebody's house and garden, and you wouldn't know if you hadn't been to their house and garden, but because you have, you're kind of like, I swear that's your dog you're talking about.
You mentioned then about book 3, but I'm interested in speaking about book 1, which was The Truths and Triumphs of Grace Atherton. So can you tell us a little bit about who Grace Atherton is?
I'd like to think in a way Grace Atherton is all of us. She's very much living the experience, or this kind of societal experience of being female, and she's 40. So she also feels that kind of urgency of, you know, as women we have to choose, don't we, whether we're going to have kids or not. And she's definitely feeling that as a very a big part of who she is. But Grace has got herself in a bit of a tangle, and Grace is actually in a relationship with a married man, and that was very much what I wanted to write about. I know that women have affairs as well, but this is very particularly about when men have affairs. We tend to blame the woman, and we say, oh, she made such a play for him, oh, she wouldn't leave him alone, oh, he was led astray. Well, no, he's a grown-up. He made a decision. He chose to do this. And I wanted to look at what it is that makes a woman feel that she only deserves that very small part of another person, that she only deserves part of somebody else's husband, rather than deserving her own happiness. And I wanted to look at A, what it is that drives somebody to that point, and B, why do we condemn them? Why do we condemn the woman, the person who isn't married in this case, but we tend to think that the person who is married was not really responsible. Poor sausage. He didn't have much choice. You know, and you hear it all the time. And it's fascinated me for decades, since when my children were at primary school in Canterbury. I was standing in the playground, and there was a mum who I didn't know very well, but standing on the other side of the playground, and another mum flew into the playground and attacked her, and they had this proper, I suppose you would call it, a cat fight in the playground about the husband of one of them. And it's just like, why aren't you hitting him? Like, why aren't you fighting him? Why are you fighting each other? I don't understand.
I'm definitely agreeing with you on that one, Anstey, definitely.
Oh, I mean, one of the things about it is we don't have a word for a man who is a mistress. We just don't have a word for it. We could say Lothario, but that doesn't mean the same thing. It's that whole idea of mistress. It's like concubine, isn't it? Or it's something from the Dark Ages that only applies to women, and it doesn't apply to men, and it's just so wrong.
That's so interesting. Despite the messiness of Grace's life and the somewhat chaos and what you've described, the book still is described as a feel-good novel. And although you were set out to write about the affair and all that business, did you set out to write a feel-good? Is that what you thought you were going to write when you first started?
Yeah, always. I think I set out to write a book where happiness belongs to my protagonist, and it's up to her to find it, and she's not going to find it through anybody else. She's got to learn to find it in herself. And that, I think, I like fiction to read as well as to write. I like fiction that has like a purpose, that is going to teach you something and tell you something, and it's going to make you feel better about the world. It's going to make you understand.
Unfortunately, the interview ends there owing to technical difficulties. That's such a shame. We had lots more to talk about. We'll have to save it for another time. But thank you, Anstey, for joining us at Kent Libraries on the Books.